Hello. As you know, 12 of us from First Christian recently returned from Louisville, Kentucky, where we participated in this year's General Assembly. Having missed our 2021 assembly due to COVID, it was a welcome joy to gather with disciples from across the United States and Canada and around the world. The worship and the music, they were inspiring. The tone of the whole assembly was joy-filled and hopeful, and much was learned, and important business was done. Now, you might remember that before we left, those of us who were going to assembly hosted a session for you to learn more about the business items that we would be voting. And we didn't want to leave you without follow-up to that. So today I wanted to invite you to spend a little bit of time with me as I share some information about the votes that we took. Now, you can read more about this if you go to the denominational website, go to ga.disciples.org. You can read more about all of the resolutions. You can read the content of all of them, as well as to see the results. I really just want to review that handful of Sense of the Assembly resolutions that we talked about at our meeting, as well as a few of the operational policy and organizational resolutions with you. I want to just let you know what happened, but also talk about how this can impact our life together. So we're going to start. Each of these resolutions has a name. It begins with GA, that's for General Assembly, and then they're assigned a number. So I'm just going to share them that way. So let's start with GA 2338. This one was titled Concerning Food Waste, Food Insecurity, and Environmental Justice. This item was adopted. Now, it's likely in hearing the title of this item, you already know what it's about. And you may have already thought of things that we can do as a congregation and as individuals to respond to it. Things like composting and using reusable rather than single-use plates and cups and silverware. Things like minimizing our meat consumption and certainly our food waste. Some of these things we're doing, some of these things we're talking about. Our green team is doing a great job helping keep us in touch with these ideas and moving on actions. But there's always more that we can adopt. The other reminder that this resolution gives us is that those we might call the least of these are often most impacted by climate change. And so we're invited to change our behaviors, but also to advocate for public policies that create just, healthy, and sustainable life on Earth. The next item is GA 2339, Compelled to Witness, Answering the Cry of Our Palestinian Siblings. This was also adopted. This item recognizes that political policies toward Israel often get in the way of our hearing the voices of Palestinians, and it sits as a reminder of our commitment to the rights of all human beings. While the item does strongly condemn anti-Semitism, it also recognizes that often policies of the State of Israel, when those are criticized, that is perceived as anti-Semitism. But this recognizes that they can be criticized without it being anti-Semitic. It calls us to educate ourselves. And we do have resources put out by disciples to help us do this. It calls us to choose experiences that allow us to hear all of the voices, in this case, especially the voices of Palestinian neighbors, and to advocate for policies that honor the personhood of all people. The next item is GA 2340. This is building on our church's commitment to faith-based investing. It is a reaffirmation of a commitment that we have had to be moral and ethical in our investing as a denomination. It is a reminder that our conversations need to be ongoing, especially in an ever-changing landscape of investing and of the ways that those businesses that we invest in are impacting climate and people. It also calls on the church's financial ministries, so the denominations, to create educational materials to really help congregations and individuals learn more and to be able to increase their commitment to faith-based investing. You may know, as I do, that often we care about things like this, but we aren't even sure where to start. So this item asks our denomination to help create some materials so that we can do a better job. This resolution was also adopted. Then we heard GA 2341, calling the church to oppose Christian nationalism. This is in response to the rise of Christian nationalism that we have seen, and this item calls us to denounce it in all its forms. Now, this really seems obvious in many ways, I think, to all of us, but I know that I find myself aware that many of us, myself included, don't even fully understand all of the ways and places that Christian nationalism, not in its big, obvious ways, but its little insidious ways, can creep into our lives. So, part of what this means is that it calls us to educate ourselves to understand the history and the impact of Christian nationalism and to speak out against it. This resolution was adopted. The last of the sense of the assembly items that we talked about at the meeting before General Assembly is one that was not adopted, but was referred to the office of General Minister and President for further work. Now, while it wasn't adopted, that doesn't make it unimportant, but it means that the feeling was we had some more work to do beforehand so that we were really ready to adopt it and ready to act on it. That item was GA 2337, titled Recognition of a Truth and Healing Council to honor our covenantal relationship with Indigenous peoples and to discern ways of reparations for a path to reconciliation. So a lot of what was in this item has to do with some structural things within the denomination, as you hear in there, like a recognition of a council. It talked about some reparations from different bodies of the church. Even though this wasn't adopted, I suspect it will come back to us later in a fuller form and with greater readiness to respond. But there is work that we can begin doing. Part of what this resolution invited congregations and individuals to do is to listen to the voices of Indigenous people, to be learning about how we have impacted them and their ancestors, to be finding ways toward reconciliation, which may include reparations. This is work, even without the adoption of this item, that we can begin even now. Now, while we were at Assembly, there were actually two more resolutions that came up. There is a process by which emergency resolutions can be raised during the Assembly. These are items that are more timely and that couldn't have been formulated to meet the usual process, which includes a deadline 6 months prior to General Assembly. So the first of those is GA 2352. It's an invitation to oppose anti-trans legislation and to affirm the dignity of transgender and gender diverse people. This item was adopted. Friends, in Iowa alone, there were almost 30 bills introduced, 4 of which made it through the legislative process and were signed into law by our governor. These bills not only take away the rights of trans young people and their families, but also remove diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts and important information from curriculum. Between those actions and the realities of higher rates of mental illness and suicide for LGBTQ plus individuals, as well as our commitment as an open and affirming congregation, this is a resolution we can definitely respond to, both through our advocacy and speaking out, but also through our continued commitment to offer safe space for all of God's children, especially trans and gender diverse children. And I might add that not only did this item pass, but it passed unanimously. There was not a single voice against it. The second emergency resolution was GA 2353, concerning solidarity with the Faith Coalition to stop Cop City and defend the Weelaunee Forest. This item references a situation some of you may be aware of in Atlanta, Georgia, where a public safety training center, often referred to as Cop City, is being built in a predominantly Black neighborhood and also requires the destruction of almost 400 acres of land in the Weelaunee Forest, which not only is one of Atlanta's largest green spaces, but is also sacred land to the Muskogee people. This resolution stands then at the intersection of racism in policing and environmental justice. Now, this resolution was referred rather than being adopted at this time, largely because there wasn't a lot of familiarity with the situation and many people didn't feel informed enough to make a decision. There were also some issues with timing. That is one of the risks of emergency resolutions. So they weren't able to get the text of this resolution into everyone's hands. But again, even though it wasn't adopted, it's an item that challenges us to learn more and to act for justice. Each of these sense of the assembly resolutions leaves us with a challenge congregationally and a challenge individually, a challenge to learn and to act and to advocate. So I hope we will continue these conversations. Now, there's 3 other items I just want to mention. Remember, not all of the resolutions we have are sense of the assembly. So we did adopt GA 2343, which was the amendments to the design of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. So this does some changes to our structure as a denomination. You can go to that website and read all of the details. But the thing I want to highlight here is that, among other things, this means that we will go from having in-person General Assemblies every 2 years to having General Assemblies annually, but we will have them with 2 years being online and every 3rd year being in person. Now, there's a 2-year implementation period. So we'll still have an in-person General Assembly in 2025, but this new rotation will start after that. The big implication for us as a congregation is that we will have more opportunities for you to get involved in General Assemblies and to be part of our larger denominational conversations. We also re-elected our General Minister and President, Reverend Terry is what she goes by, Hord Owens. Because of the changes to the design, typically the General Minister and President term is 6 years. For this term, it will be 8 years. That will allow the next election to align with our new cycle of in-person General Assemblies. Terry has been a good leader for us for the last 6 years, and we look forward to her continued leadership. The final item I will mention is GA 2347, which is the report of the Time and Place Committee. In other words, this is the item that tells us where we get to go for the next General Assembly. So mark your calendars. The 2025 General Assembly will take place in Memphis, Tennessee. The dates are July 12th through 15. Again, that's 2025. I want to remind you that we always welcome more folks to get involved. Maybe in the future, you will go as our congregational voting delegates like Jay and Melinda and Pam did this year. Or maybe you'll go as regional voting delegates, like Cameron and Kalia and Spencer. Yes, 3 of our teenagers got to vote on behalf of our region. Or maybe you would like to attend General Assembly simply as a non-voting participant because there is a lot that goes on there that is worth being a part of, well beyond just the business sessions. General assemblies are a really great time to remember who we are as a denomination and to connect with others. So if you have other questions, just let me know. Um, if you want to continue these conversations, just let me know. I really look forward to seeing where these conversations take us. Thanks.